history first, Shakina?
I prepared both. I thought I'll finish history because those are only two, and we'll move into geography how much.
All right.
Because
So
after few presentation in geography, we have some experiments to do.
correct.
So in case I reach till there, then I might not cut short. No, so I thought I'll do with history first. I'm ready with both anyways.
Please go on with your plan. So we'll look at history. In history, did we look at the three phases of history? Did we discuss the three phases of history? Did we talk about the hunter-gatherer communities and then looking at agriculture and then urbanization? And I had to send you notes. Did I send you the notes? If my notes are pending, then the next topic I'll be sending it to you. The next topic that we'll be looking at is civilizations. So Shakina will start from civilizations, and that is what we're going to look at. And if you remember, I've been always talking to you about history question answer charts. So today we'll have a look at that. The material is not what Shakina is going to show. She will show you a soft copy of that. You'll be able to imagine. And when on Saturday when I'm here, I'll show you the material also. Okay.
Man, just give me the host thing so that I can share the screen.
Share screen, no?
Yeah.
Shakina, you've got it.
Okay. I'll do it when it comes to that.
Yes, Shakina. Carry on, Shakina.
Good everyone. I'm hoping you are all very well aware and into the course for now. So I'll just take from there. We'll be doing civilizations today. So civilizations, as always, what do we do with the elementary children? We start with a story, no? The best way to start off civilization with children here also would be with a kickoff story. And it wouldn't happen at a stretch because this work is a really huge work. Even as adults, when you get into research, you have the possibility of getting lost into it. I was lost into it at least for a week or more than that. And you should imagine how it happens to the children. So you'll have to get into it and see what it is. And then we'll have to narrow it down according to their preference. So that narrowing down initially happens through a form of story. So we create their intrigueness, we capture their interest in the form of story. We let them out with the questions and they will get into research with those questions for some times and then they'll come back. So we then introduce the question and answers. It doesn't happen at a stretch. It goes on a staggered basis and you will have to be holding the hands of children for quite a long time as they journey into this research. Because it's a really immense work and you will get to know when you see the question and answers what kind of work the children will be getting into. So to begin with, if you are following a curriculum, then you can narrow it down to any civilization that you will be having to follow in a curriculum, or you can choose one. If the children have taken interest from there, you can choose a resource, or you can choose one and go about with the story and create interest for them to get into this. So yeah, the material for this again should be limited. You can replace it as and when the quench of that civilization has happened and enough work has been done. Too many materials being in the environment also doesn't satisfy the need. Like we always say, necessary and sufficient would be enough. And you can also keep exchanging the materials with other institutes or, among yourselves, among the adults as well. So the introduction to the civilization would be, how is history so far, as far as you've seen in elementary, how has history been for the children? If I can ask you all. Did you all get my question? Are you all there?
More about wars and kingdoms, kings.
In our curriculum, I mean, so far as you've seen history, how has it been?
Indian history about...
In the elementary, I'm talking about. In elementary, how have you introduced history to the
like about the
from the charts?
Oh,
sorry.
It's been introduced through charts and timeline.
Okay, and those were mostly about?
Mostly about the coming of life and all that.
Yeah, the prehistoric periods. No, we've not come to the wars or whatever we've been always taught in histories. No, it was always about the Earth and the coming of Earth. It was all done in huge manners. No, coming of solar system, coming of life on Earth, coming of civilizations. That also was coming of human beings and not civilization so far. So when you've reached the human beings second chart, there you get to see the civilizations. You know, you get to see Stone Age, and then there you get to see the instruments and the materials that they made, how they were living and how they were moving. So that would be a probable starting point for you for civilization. But this is where you actually bring the children in contact with the humans and the civilizations and how they sprang about. So most of it, as we know, was with animal kingdom, plant kingdom. Now we are narrowing it down to human beings as a species and what happened and how they originated, what each civilization brought into it, and how it moved away or how it got replaced with another civilization. So this, through all these things, you are bringing an awareness to the children in the form of, oh, maybe this is how people were living. Now we get to see an insight into how they were living and how the civilization came up. Like even today, we talk about the Mohenjo-daro and Harappa and Indus Valley, right? So we get to see a little bit of insights, and through all these observations, through all these informations, we get to understand how they lived, not really how they lived. But these questions will aid them to get into the research of what might have happened or what is the research done so far. Yes? So how is it introduced in the elementary? So it is introduced as always through stories, and then we have timelines. Then we have demonstrations and experiments. And there is coming of life, and then the fundamental needs chart. So all these things ground the coming of human beings. Then we can take into the question and answer charts and get in detail with every study that you are focusing or the children have brought it out of their interest. So basically, what is civilizations now? If we ask you what is civilization about, what would be able to say?
It is changes that happens in the basic needs of the human beings.
Okay.
Maybe in the clothing and housing, shelter, they had so much of changes. So it is about that.
Okay. That's one part of it. But what basically when you talk about civilization, what do you actually are referring to?
how the fundamental needs were satisfied by a particular group of people living in a
Yes.
particular
When we're talking about civilization, we're talking about group of people. Now, how many people come together with their differences and then how they are all mutually living in that space with certain ground rules. No, that's always how human beings have been living, and that is always about a community. And civilization is also how it originated. Right? So it's a group of people living together in an organized manner. There can't be chaos. Then it becomes a war zone. So in an organized manner, and there are, as always, certain rules to follow. Just like in the environment also, there's always certain rules to follow. This has always been everywhere. So civilizations also were based on these foundations. And it is also very important to be aware of the difference between civilization and civilized. So what does it mean to be civilized, and what does it, we all know what it means to be civilization, right? So what it means to be civilized, also there has to be an understanding.
Yeah. Learning the rules and following the rules properly.
Might be that alone is enough for being civilized. Then can there be a proper definition that can be attached to civilized is the question now. That's for you to think on. But let's just continue and move further. So civilization now again becomes a social organization, where civilized people, whereas civilized meaning is like you have a moral and ethical organization as a person yourself. So you alone bring that particular component to the civilization itself. So how important it is to be civilized in a civilization is also important. So many civilizations that have come about, no, have to have a lifestyle. Sometimes that can hardly be called as civilized. If you will study into the civilization and see, or if you study about how human beings evolved as civilizations, most of them can't be called as civilized in today's mindset. For them, at that time, it might have been civilized. So you have to be aware of this when you're bringing it to the children's awareness. Some civilizations might be barbaric. For them, it was perfectly okay to hunt humans and eat them. That is what that civilization believed. So, but can you deny them by saying that they were not civilized? Very recently, that's been happening in our world, right? Calling the other civilizations or whatever superior, inferior. So these are the awareness that you will be indirectly bringing in to the children, to the awareness, because it's a very huge topic and there's a lot of possibilities to get lost into it and to become political about it. Even when you talk about Indian history, these things are something that you should be working around and bring sensitivity to children and as adults as well. So moving further, key concepts that are to be given will be questions that will arise about why this civilization came about. So when you as an adult are getting into a study, you should have some basic awareness of what all you will be facing with or how you will be bringing this forward to children. Okay, so you will be having questions that will arise. Why do you think this civilization came about, or what was this need to move away and then start another civilizations? Curious questions like that. And then different people discover or invent the same thing at the same time? Because if you compare different civilizations, they might see that both of them had done that same thing. So would it be fair to say that they copied them, or they did they invent first, or did they invent first? So those things about feeling superior, all those things will come. So it might have happened that many people at the same time would have discovered or invented same thing. All these things you will have to be aware about, and also how inventions, spread from civilization through trade and also through migration. So where have you already seen this about trading and inventions being carried forward?
Sun and earth.
No,
The
we're
cloud.
talking about inventions and discoveries being carried from one civilization to another.
Language.
Yes, where in language?
Our written languages from various cultures, it have come and now it is into some form, no? So it took different forms in different civilizations.
Yes. So how the Phoenicians brought it from the hieroglyphics, getting aware and then building up on those things. So they might have come across all these things before. So you might as well have to be aware of what that civilization brought forward, or did it borrow anything of those things. So then another thing is like many theories about a particular civilization. There are many theories about one particular civilization because it's all inferred, it's all what the archaeologists are trying to infer from their discoveries. So, and then children can also come up with their own theories. So here we are trying to help the children realize what is similar and what is different in the way these groups of people, satisfied their physical and spiritual needs. In other words, their fundamental needs. So we are trying to put out a picture of how these people lived, what were their lives about, and then make the children come to their own conclusion and judgment about that particular civilization. Yeah, so now studies for you to look into how societal collapses happen also, because when a civilization arises, there's also a downfall for that civilization, right? So how that happened can also be done Societal collapses is also another critical part of the civilization study. So this is what the present history focuses on for children, you know. This has become the prime subject, how one civilization rose to power and then how it fell and what replaced it, things like that. So that also can be considered from your point of view. So there are 8 factors that have been enlisted to see how civilization collapses. So now when you're talking about the collapse of civilization, there are 8 factors that contribute to the downfall of civilizations. The first is deforestation and habitat destruction. So how civilizations came about was, how did they choose to settle? They choose to settle near rivers and forests, no, and for their animals and habitats. So now when deforestation happens, so that becomes one of the main criteria for the civilization collapse. Second is the soil problems, like the soil erosion, fertility losses, salinization. And these contributes. Then third is the overfishing. When there's excessive fishing and their livelihood. There might be some civilization that depends on the sea for their livelihood, you know, because they lived as groups, different groups concentrated on different style of living. So sometimes when it's overfishing, then they have to start moving about. So water management problems. Then again, overhunting, because they were generally hunter-gatherers. So overhunting causes that. Then effects of introduced species on native species. Even when it comes to plants, you know, you all have to be aware of what is our native plants and what are all the introduced species here, and also in the form of animals. Population growth. And the last one is increased per capita impact on people. So there are also 4 new factors that's been added to this list that contributes to the downfall, which is human caused climate change. These are the latest ones that's been added to the list. The first one is a human caused climate change. That's something we are actively combating on a daily basis. Then building up of toxins in the environment, very prominent nowadays. And there's the energy shortage. And full human utilization of the Earth's photosynthetic capacity.
Yes, ma'am.
Full human utilization of Earth's photosynthetic capacity. What do you mean by that?
Proportionate of plants and the human beings.
The deforestation rates and also collapses of ecosystem. Every ecosystem contributes to the balance of photosynthesis. Even oceans do that. So when an ecosystem is collapsed, the whole of it is now held in power with the humans. So these can be topic for older children. They can get into research combating the current problem that the society faces and what are the theories that led to different civilizations collapses, and in future also they can estimate, because you get to see a lot happening currently also.
Shakina ma'am,
Yes.
how can we explain our population growth leading to civilization collapse?
You mean to say you would want to explain that?
To children, I mean, if I were to reason it out, what should we be saying about how population growth led to civilization collapse?
What do you think would be the reason for that, Imtiaz sir?
No, as I see, as the population grows, the civilization should flourish. No, is that not the case?
So then again, you'll have to go back to the foundation, what was not followed, what led to the downfall. Because when we spoke about civilization itself, we spoke about the rules that they have to follow and, the society is abiding by those structures or no.
Okay.
Lately, and also we spoke about migration. So these form the foundation of any civilization collapse. And you can apply that to even today's civilization. If you see, those would be the foundations. And also now the government also has to, nowadays the government also comes into picture. Previously, it was a rise of this that particular empire, no? It was in that form of civilizations. Now, again, when there's a play of government, then, but the foundation remains the same. So you can lead children to think in these terms. Has anything of these sort been applied currently also and it is standing true? Because those will be the same driving force
Okay.
for all the civilization collapse.
Study of history in itself is like a scientific study to look at human behavior and patterns. And once you understand the patterns, you know there is a cause and effect situation at every point in history. That's the main I would say aim to study history itself in itself. Why would we want to dig up graves to understand what happened before? So for what lies for us in that? What should not to remember the dates, when, which year, what happened, all that, but for us to see a pattern and for us to know if I'm going to go in this direction, where am I going to be ending? No, to make a forecast, to be able to foresee things. That should be, the vested interest in studying history. Not to keep for repeating the same mistakes again and say, oh, here we end up in the same war. We end up in the same kind of disaster again. So that should be the vested interest, and there and if we go in that direction, we should be able to see, very clearly, or lead the children also very clearly. And any question, from there, that point of view can be answered. And for that, a lot of research, a lot of study should be made. This study of civilizations does that to the child. You'll be able to see, you'll be able to see the, question and answers also, the material, and then you'll be able to understand how all this culminates into how every civilization followed a certain pattern and then, led to its decline. This the children are very interested in. As far as I know, after having worked with children, what led to their decline? Why are they not, existing still? When they could, they flourished so well. How well they were organized, and we think we are the modern, human beings. We the most modern of all, and we are the most civilized of all. But you'll be surprised to see how well they were organized. The early civilizations. Even today, we don't have such kind of roads or such kind of sanitation. We don't. We're still struggling for all that. So then what would have led to their decline? Why did that happen? It will be a very curious question in the children's mind. And then to look at the pattern, no, every civilization has its own downfall, and that's why Shakina very strongly pointed at the 8 points, scenarios where what could have happened, what could go wrong, and how it can fall in. If you are going to take up this point, no, Imtiaz sir, how population explosion can lead to, what is that question?
Civilization collapse.
How will that lead to a civilization collapse? So then some amount of research on that is required. What do we here think can be the reason? All of us, if you can throw some light on it. With population explosion, can it lead to a civilization collapse? First thing. Yeah, Suchi?
Yes, ma'am.
Food, ma'am.
Ma'am, I can think of two things straight
Hmm.
away. One is the more the number of people, the greater the
Demand.
opportunity. Yeah, one is the demand, and therefore, directly affects whatever resources that one needs, can lead to shortage of various resources. And second is conflict.
Hmm. What kind of conflicts?
They can be, yes, political conflicts, social conflicts, and conflicts again directly arising from, say, shortage of resources.
Hmm.
So this in turn could lead to collapse of the civilization.
Hmm. Valid points, no? Any other point that comes to your mind? Demand and supply and conflicts. Political, social, economic. Yeah. Yes, sir, what comes to your mind?
Yeah, just what no, Suchi said. Demand
Please.
supply is one thing that came to my
Major.
mind.
Major.
Yeah.
Space constraints may also be there.
What, ma?
Space constraint, ma'am. So people chose to move somewhere else.
Yeah. That could also be, no? So when people choose to move, then that could also lead to.
The natural calamities, ma'am. That
Natural calamities is a different scenario altogether. Yes, sir's question is, how can population explosion lead to downfall of a civilization? Today we are at the verge of that. We've become the number one country in population. And you can actually feel that wherever you go, there's so much of crowd, there's so much of rush, and there is so much of demand for anything and everything, isn't it? Of late, have you experienced that? You go out and then there is no place for you to stand there. No, there's no availability of place, food, and you get frustrated. You just want to
Ma'am, like the other day I was saying,
Uh.
contrary to the growth of population in India, the population of Kerala has reduced.
that's what you were saying. Yeah.
Yeah.
That was, I keep thinking of that, what kind of a scenario. I'm all the time, thinking of it. My thoughts go there and I wonder what will happen to it.
Yeah, we become the workforce for the world.
Uh,
Migration. Migration, yeah.
When we come to
There's a joke
migration.
about
Shakina.
there's a meme about that even in a moon, no, there's a Keralite there.
Huh?
It's like that, yes.
Yeah.
It was a very famous.
Selling tea. Yeah.
But the thing is,
It was said that there will be a Nair there. I mean, to bring about that, chai
Yeah.
hall is there. No?
No, but ironically, the place is so beautiful. It's so lush green. It's so fertile. Why would somebody want to leave that place? No, that thought keeps coming to my mind.
Ma'am, but that's the very same reason that people would want to leave as well, because when you see the mountains, the challenges are there in bringing up. Like even Himachal is really very pretty, but surviving there, people, you should see how the natives survive there. They are still in that kind of nativity. You can see in their face. We go there for this thing.
Just
For them, that yes, for them that's their reality, and should see how they live. I was shocked in the way they were building their houses. A beautiful place to study about natives and how they live, how their houses are. Just on the verge of that huge mountains. It's not even a hill. At least Kerala's height of the mountains is less, but even then, when flood and all those things happen, it's a challenge. There, they live in thatched houses in the edge of the Himadri range. It's really a huge challenge.
So when we get to the migration theories, again, it is a very interesting, study. You will then start thinking about what happens, why is it happening now, and all that. That's another study altogether. But right now, we're looking at civilizations. What intrigues me the most is, people lived before us also, and they were very, very civilized. So what were they doing, for a living? how did they find that place first? And how did they come up with such great ideas to organize that space so beautifully? And then what were the rules that bound them together? You know, today, we have a government. There are rules that we have to follow. Otherwise, we have consequences. And so it's an external force. Yeah, it's not something that comes internally for most of us, at least. You know, if you see that there is nobody at the signal, you would want to skip that signal and go if if given a chance. What is it that stops you from doing that? And this is something that intrigues me the most. What were they abided by back then? Huh? And why are we not like that? This
For
is
me, the answer was very obvious, ma'am.
uh,
They were connected with the place that they were living in. They didn't take ownership over that. You know, they were submissive to that, to the nature, and you know, they abided by the rules of the nature. Now that is what has been taken away from us, that we are not able to
connect.
do justice to whatever. Yes, especially when you're seeing about the litter and the plastic. One side keeps talking about that, but what in reality is happening? How many of us are connected to what we are doing to the world? Just yesterday, I came to see about a video where, you know, the astronauts are those who go to space. Initially, they try to find their own space, it seems. No, okay, India, Saudi, you know, wherever the astronaut belongs from. The second and third time, he starts to look at the big picture and he can only see the Earth. So what this person was talking about is like the whole politicians, whoever the world leaders, no, they should be sent once to space. Every time they're elected, they have to be thrown to space to come to this perspective and then be brought back. So some of them were commenting that they should be left there only and they shouldn't be brought back. That's the second part. But what I'm trying to say is like, we're not trying to look at the earth as earth, you know. They had that knowledge, our ancestors or the civilization that we're talking about. Consider that as a primal respect or the space, no? That mutualism was there towards the earth. But I think that now we are devoid of that completely and just somewhere floating about doing all distractions without any second thought for that matter.
Yeah, so true.
So when I did the study of the civilization, that was one prominent thing, you know, connecting north to south of America, but people were united because of that love towards the motherland or that earth itself per se, you know, the earth was what was grounding them. Now that grounding factor is what we have to find about.
Bring back to the children.
Yes. To us first of all, and then
I don't know if it can be brought to us within, you know, but the child is the last solace. I mean, and that's where it all begins. So,
but indirectly the child is watching us, no man. That's a big question. They keep watching us, and at one stage,
we are
think that
we are the examples of that's all. We are only a fistful of people who will now want to do that, but we cannot go change the whole world. So that's why our last resort is the child. The hope is the child. We can start from there only. We can't. Can you go and have a battle with the adult community? No. For that reason, I said that. They will be looking at us, and we are just a fistful, you know, just a handful. So, yeah.
So now coming back to that, the first presentation would be storytelling. So for you as adults, the first assignment for this chapter would be to choose a civilization. Someone's laughing, Hemlata is laughing. That's how it is. Otherwise, there's no point in doing the whole civilization study. So each one of you can list down the civilization that you are interested in and see how you are going to go about it, because you will have to find answers for the question answer chat that's going to be followed. But before that, when you get into the study of question and answers, you will also have to frame a story that you will be telling to the children as introduction for this civilization. So you, based on your study, you will frame the story in such a way that children are intrigued to go find certain questions, or, throw the awareness to the children about how immensely bound they were, like ma'am said, no, what made them be bound and follow the rules so religiously. And so those things, when you start to do the study, you will be able to arrive at those questions yourself, which you can present it to the children. So the first presentation would be storytelling. So children need to be initiated into thinking about that particular civilization through storytelling. So that hook would be placed there, and the story should be appealing to the imagination of the child, because you know how these children are, the grandiousness of whatever you are going to be presenting it to them. So this should highlight something very special about that particular civilization, or what you would be indirectly leading children to go about research or stay with those questions, ponder into those things. So they can look into something that's very unique about that particular civilization, and they can also look about the similarities across the civilizations that were there at that particular period of time. And they can also bring about the differences as a follow-up from that particular story. So have open-ended questions as to that can lead children to come back, research, or go further and find out more about it. So these stories, as usual, can be announced few days earlier to keep their curiosity growing. And sometimes children also might come prepared with the questions as you keep talking about those things. Children will come up with the questions. So that can be a reference point for you as well, and for the children to get into research or to guide them into what they are coming about, the direction that you need to be leading the children to. So that can bring about some order, because believe me, this work is really, really huge. And sometimes, children begin with a lot of enthusiasm and they get lost. They will not know where to go further into that. Because the immensity of the question answers and the civilization itself would be so compelling that it might end up not doable at certain point of time. So as adults, you need to be very aware as to how to narrow it down for them so that they are able to at least achieve the part that they set out to. So that part of it, you have to be really aware. So ma'am, do I give them the story, or it's about them that they can come up with the story? Ma'am, you're on mute.
You can read your story, Shakina. I'll also be sending them a few stories that I have in store. And if they choose some other civilization altogether, then they'll have to write their own kickoff story.
You don't have to note these down. I'm just going to be reading off my story just to have an understanding of which civilization I went into. So mine was the story of Inca civilizations that majorly was in the southern part of America. So today we're going to be hearing a story about a civilization in the western part of South America. And also for this presentation, you might be having the map of that particular civilization that you're talking about, so that you can pin the children to that particular geographical area that they are already aware of. You're bringing it to their conscious awareness again. So this civilization was called as Inca. It means the ruler or the lord. So legend has it that these people were from the sun god itself, and they came out of the lake Titicaca, and their leader was Ayarmanco. He chose a place to settle by using his golden staff. And when it sunk into one place in the ground, that's where they decided that they will be settling down. So, but archaeologists believe that these people were a small group of people who were the pastoral tribe during the 14th century. And they settled in the area called Cusco, and slowly they started conquering and expanding. And they left behind a military base in the newly conquered territories, and then they started expanding their kingdom again. So what happens when they conquer some place? They leave their base there, and then they again move about conquering the neighboring territory. So I wonder why they were curious to do that. But these people were also one of the most powerful ancient empires during the 12th century. And they remained in power for more than 4 centuries. They had a terrifying military rule, and they ruled from the northern tip of South America through the central to the southern tip of South America, which today is called as the part of the southern tip today is called as Santiago. And as they expanded and conquered, there were 12 million people from more than 100 different ethnic groups. And surprisingly, they managed to maintain a unified state. Can you imagine, from north to central to south, with 100 different ethnic groups, they were able to maintain the uniformity and the unitedness. How do you think that was possible? So they made it possible with their centralized language, government, and spiritual and religious belief system. So the most surprising fact of this civilization is that they managed to become one of the ancient world's most powerful empires without the use of wheels. Can you imagine, without wheels? They also didn't have cast iron, or they didn't have any form of writing. But needless to say, they were remarkable artists and musicians. And they were also the smartest mathematicians of those at that period of time. Can you imagine if there is no writing? How did math come about? So they also hold the power of inventing an ancient tool for account keeping, which is used by, that is a form of strings and knots called as kupu. So they're greatest mathematicians and also account keepers, and the only instrument that they had was this kupu. So these people also built a complex system of roads. Now imagine, no wheels, no cast irons, but they had a beautiful complex system of roads, that too in the mountains, that measured up to 24,000 kilometers. But how did they get to do all these things? I always wonder. And the most surprising thing of all these things in this civilization is that without wheels, you might be wondering how all these things and what was the reason for the roads and what was the reason for laying the roads on the mountains. They had a beautiful team of relay runners. So these runners were the ones who connected the north to the central to the south. Their sole job was to keep running and relaying the message from one part to the other. So now you know why there were no wheels and what were the wheels for this civilization. So they ran to transport goods, they ran to transport messages to all the nook and corners of the empire. So you should know what kind of devotion and what kind of sincerity that these people would have been holding in their hands. Relaying messages and also transferring goods, it's not an easy job. All they had were their 2 feet. No animals were domesticated, no wheels were there. But it's really also strange to know that such a strong military base was defeated by the Spaniards and smallpox, which was the most deadliest weapon that the Spaniards carried with themselves, and they wiped out a huge portion of this Inca civilization. So would you like to find out more about these civilizations and see what happened? How did the Spaniards come into them in the first place? Get to meet them, or how did their connection began? So this was the story, and this would be how you will leading children and see about what are the questions that they're coming with, what kind of guidance you can be giving them. You might also lead them to going out, study about civilizations in libraries, or even in museums for that matter. There are certain civilizations that's available. If you are focusing on the local civilization, the Indian one, then if you're talking about some empires, then you might have to be aware of where you can lead the children to get into that study, and come up with questions or guide them as to how they can go about their research. So after a few days, gather the children and ask them to share what they remember about the story or whatever they have found about as a form of research to their friends. And then depending on who is, you can also, group them based on what each child has brought forth. Also, then you will have to also be ready with the questions that they will coming up with, because you'll have to lead them to research books, guidance books and all those things. So you might have to keep observing their questions and keep preparing the resources from your end as well. So this goes for a long time. Children might start facing challenges once they get into it, and you will have to see where you can narrow it down for them, because their goal when they begin can be really huge and they want to do everything. So as adults, we should be able to narrow it down for them and make it doable. So that kind of steeringness should happen from our end, and we should be prepared for that. So sometimes they might also want to go back and represent what they found, in the form of story or drama. So you can enable those things as well. But mostly with younger children, it would be the work of adult to step in and keep guiding them. And do you want to add anything to this?
Yeah. Yeah. So would you like to hear one more story? A kickoff story. These are called kickoff stories, which starts the child's interest into, you get the child's interest kicked off into this, zone to wanting to know more. There's another story that I would like to read for you. This is the Huang He Yellow River Valley Civilization. River Valley civilizations is another study in itself, and we know most of the civilizations happened around the rivers, right? This is the Huang He, the Chinese civilization. Okay, in northern China, nomadic hunters once stalked and killed wild rhinoceros and elephants, which could be found in the area up until around 1000 BC. As these ancient hunters wandered the lands, another group of people were developing the first civilization to appear in China, beginning in approximately 1700 BC. At this time, a tribe called Shang conquered neighboring tribes along the Huanghe River. They were able to do this because they had chariots, which their opponents had not developed. The farmers of the Huanghe area grew millet, rice, wheat, and barley in the valley's fertile soil. The soil had been deposited by the river in southern regions, but in the northern highlands, yellow leaves laid down by wind from the north was in places up to 200 feet deep. It is likely that early sites of the Shang civilization are still buried under the silt and yellow leaves carried and deposited by Huanghe River floods. The disastrous floods in the plains have caused so much hardship to the Chinese that they call the river China's sorrow. Our current information comes from excavations of 3 of the civilization's buried cities, Early To, Zhengzhou, and Anyang. Early Tao is the oldest of the cities. The Huanghe River civilizations had a divine king or emperor, and then commoners and slaves. Craftspeople worked in bronze, bone, jade, and wool. These people had also tamed the silk moth and were able to produce fine silk cloth. Their pottery was some of the finest the world had ever seen. Buildings were made of rammed earth, a method still commonly used in China today. Some of the walls built in this way were so strong that they still survive. The Shang appear to have used some kind of decimal system of measurement. They smelted iron 1800 years before this process was developed in Europe and traded using bronze coins shaped like spade or knives. Near the end of the 19th century, farmers near the town of Anyang in Hunan province found fragments of old bones marked with peculiar symbols. No one could read these writings, and some people even wondered if they had been made by spirits. Eventually, the bones were sold to druggists at as dragon bones. They were believed to be powerful as medicines for many different problems. In 1899, the markings were identified as being an ancient form of Chinese writing, but scientific excavation of the site, now known to be that of Shang capital, did not begin until 1928. The shoulder blade bones of animals and tortoises shells were called oracle bones because they were inscribed with questions asked of the spirits, especially the spirits of royal ancestors by the king. The king would ask his questions and a scribe would cut his words onto the bone or tortoise shell. Then the diviner would take over. A hot fire of red hot coals was prepared and a metal rod was thrust among them, where it became hotter and hotter. Soon it was hot enough and the diviner pressed it onto the bone bearing the questions. There was probably a sizzling sound and the smell of the rising smoke would have filled the air. The scribe would place the rod on to one side or perhaps back into the fire and carefully study the bone. The heat of the rod had caused cracks to appear, and the patterns that these cracks made helped the diviner to decide what answer the spirits had given. The script in which the questions were written was the oldest form of Chinese writing ever found, and the questions themselves covered everything to do with the kingdom of those times. There were questions about the weather, especially the rainfall for the proper season, hunting, religious questions about religious ceremonies, wars, and sicknesses. Modern Chinese script is directly descended from the characters of the Shang dynasty, whose characters are like small pictures. The Shang were eventually overrun by a group of people who may once have been the subjects of the Shang. The Zhao founded their own dynasty, which lasted longer than any other in Chinese history. It was this dynasty that constructed the Great Wall of China. Zhao were conquered by the Xin, a group of barbarians, according to the Cont'd. The new emperor was responsible for what is known as the burning of the books in 213 BC, when almost every written record of the past was burned. He did not want the people comparing his rule to the rules of the emperors of the past. The Xin dynasty lasted only 4 years after the death of its emperor, and the Han dynasty came into power. Does this raise questions in you about the dynasty itself? The Xin, the Han, and the Shang dynasty. What kind of questions come to your mind?
Why did they build the wall?
Why
Great Wall of Why was the wall built?
Anything else that comes to your mind?
Ma'am, why it was ended basically? Why the entire civilization came to an end?
Hmm.
If they were so strong, how did the barbarians capture them?
Capture them. What was the weak link there? No? So here it says the Shang were eventually overrun by a group of people who may once have been the subjects of the Shang.
The same wall that they built, man, that was their downfall. You know, they built the wall, but the people were led through the wall was their downfall.
Hmm.
The wall was strong, not so the people, they say.
Anything else that that you would like to know about this dynasty. So this is how the kickoff stories are, giving you a very overall picture of that civilization, bringing in some very significant points, and then it starts building up, and from there on the children start researching. So it's not a very complete picture, but then just an overview of and some significant points that civilization stands for, even today, that we remember it for. Okay? So, yes, Shakina.
So
please.
these question answer charts are for this very own reason. Now, children can take off in varying directions and they can get lost into it. So to narrow them down is the main purpose of these question answers, and it's beautifully designed such that it culminates every aspect that one could think of. So even as adults, when you get into your assignments, you will also have to prepare question answers based on your civilization that you've chosen. So you will get to see how these questions are framed in such a way that every aspect is covered in these questions. So this serves as a guidelines for the children to, narrow down their research. So that you as adults are also not lost along with them. They might want to go in every direction. So you might bring them one day and then say, let's just sit down. We have something more to do with your researches that you've been conducting so far. And then you can start introducing these question answers to them. It can either be stuck on a bigger chart or you can have them as smaller pouches, however it's convenient for the environment. But the amount of the material that you have in the environment should be limited. It shouldn't be giving all the answers to them. They might also have to go in and start searching some more. So you can choose, you've already chosen stories, the kickoff stories. So you can introduce the civilization based on the state curriculum as well. You can align your story based on the state curriculum if you're following the state curriculum. So what the books are insisting on, definitely when you look into the history books, they do that, but mostly limited to the war and downfall and immediately how the next one conquered. So you can guide children to, choose. They do come up with a lot of interest, but because of the pressure of the, what do you call that, syllabus or whatever, they just go about it. That sometimes they do come up with curious questions that, what, this has happened, that has happened in the Ashokan Empire. So you might lead children even through that as a starting point. So, but also the materials can have details related to those aspects when you are tailoring it to the state curriculum. So then, as always, we don't overwhelm the children with a lot of information because this can lead to that overwhelming amount of information that the children will come in contact with. So this material is the key to narrow it down to that particular field of study, and it should be deliberately limited. So if it's younger children, you can even give only one part of these question answers and also have enough textbooks to support the civilization study. So the introduction for this would be the question answer charts was developed by Princey Walker in Holland. She developed the material on which history lessons can be built with. So these question answers were courtesy to her.
Would you
The
like to
material
spell the name?
Prince Werker from Holland. The material required are the history question answer charts. So the descriptions are that these charts are color coded as always, and each set of questions have a title and they belong to that particular category, and they are all in the same color. So all these questions can be stuck on a big chart as well, or they can be left as individual packets. Like I said, there are common questions that can be related to these are all common questions that can be related to any part of study. You can take any civilization or any part of that civilization, and these questions will still give you the answers to those. The prerequisite would obviously be the kickoff story and fundamental needs. And the purpose is to help the child understand the evolution of communities along with their needs, to help the child understand the evolution of communities along with their needs. So I'll just give me a minute. I'll share the screen so you will be able to see the question answers. Let me know if you're able to see my screen. Yes, okay. So I just had to keep a sample of the civilization that I spoke about. So I have a map about where that civilization is for the children. And then you will be laying down these question answers on a mat. Like when you are physically working with ma'am on Saturday, you might get to see how they are presented. But I'll just go into and show you the questions. What kind of questions you will be looking at. So the one that I've highlighted is the topic of that this color coded questions. This is practical activities of the people. So the questions under these are, what did they produce? What do they produce or what did they produce? So how do they find their country or how did they find their country? How did they make it more habitable? Then what were the types of work and occupations? What tools and techniques do or did they have? How do they make use of natural resources? So I have some answers here as well. Try matching them just for your basic understanding as to how you will be doing this. And then we'll get to see the other questions. I have few answers here. So what do or did they produce? Can you read from the answers and see if anything matches? Sometimes you might have answers that matches both the questions as well or more than one question.
Cotton, cocoa, maize, cables.
Okay. Do the other answers match to the questions? Then move to the next. Here's some that you can try matching. It's just to give you an understanding of how this works. You will also be having answers that has this outline so that children have an indirect understanding that this pertains to these question cards. You need not match to the question, but you can just leave the answers in a pouch and the questions in a pouch, if that's how it is, or leave the answers alone and leave the questions out on a big chart, stuck on a chart. But the ultimate aim is to read the question, read the answer, and try matching them.
So
Yes.
one of it says they divided the entire coast into 3 sections. Fishing was only allowed in one sector at a time, rotating every year. That gave 2/3 of the coast. Just a minute. That gave 2/3 of the coast 2 years to replenish. For 1,000 years, they did this and never ran out of fish or seafood. Now, which question do you think it fits here? We have what are or were the types of work and occupations? What tools and techniques do or did they have? How do or did they make use of natural resources? Do we have more questions, Shakina? Or
Yeah, ma'am. Here,
the
two questions are in the previous page.
the practical
What did they produce?
what do or did they produce? How do or did they find their country, and how did they make it more habitable? Which of these questions do you think that card fits? They divided the entire course into 3 sections. Fishing was only allowed in. Anybody? Quick.
How did they make use of natural resources?
Yeah, I think it fits there, no? Any other question it fits? Anybody?
What were the types of work and occupations?
Maybe. It also tells us the technique, no? Technique used.
Technique.
What tools and
What techniques did they have?
So
Like
it
they
could
did.
be, it could come under techniques also. So what would you do if there is a card that fits into two questions, that fits onto two questions? You know, any way of placing it? Quick. Anybody?
Between those two cards.
In between those two
Yes.
cards, right?
Yes.
Like that, no?
Keep questioning the children. Let them come up with the answers as to why they think that's where it fits, and reason it out with them. So that would be your work. This might lead to a lot of no, I am right, I am wrong. So we are not getting into, so you will have to narrow down to what is the aim of doing this, and bring the awareness to again and again to the questions, and discuss more so that you come to a consensus on if this agreement is right, or let them have justification from their points. No. So then this is one set of questions where I have the answers. The others I'll just be showing you the questions. The second is the nature of the country. The questions that form under this: what are where the soil and climate like? What are or where the flora and fauna like? Who are the people that live or lived there? How did they come and why? Then the intellectual and spiritual aspects of culture. What language do or did they speak? What is or was their art like? What is or was the concept of justice there? What was their education like? How advanced is or was their learning? Who, if anyone, is or was their spiritual leader? What is or were their ideas on birth and death? So then comes the relationship within group and other groups. So how about travel and migration? How did the group settle where they did? How are or where they governed? Do or did they trade with others by barter or other means? What about their dress, food, houses, customs, and family life? How is or was their money and goods held individually or collectively? Is or was their care taken of the poor? Do or did they trade among themselves? What about wars and conquest? Do or did they have slaves and take people into subjugation? So when you get into the study of these questions, you will see to that every aspect is covered in these questions. Everything is taken care of, and this serves as a overall guide for the research. Sometimes if you feel that child is facing it too challenging, you can narrow it down to one particular aspect of that so that they're able to achieve what they set out to. So what can be the follow-up for this? Sit with them in the initial stages for quite a number of times until the children are comfortable to do this without you. Or they are able to bring about their research and place the answers based on the questions. Do only one set of question and answers with them. The rest, the children can take over, and you can be as an observer and guide them if there's any need. So what can be the follow-up for this?
We can ask children to find some more story, like how we do.
What do you think? That's how they started off into this. So from here, how are they going to go forward? Because when you started off with the kick-off story, sometimes you're giving more than one or children come up with their civilization, then they are already into that. So this question and answer gives them moving forward way to get into that particular research. So what are you trying to say, Lalita? You are trying to say
They
find
can do
another
some more research on this, ma'am.
Okay.
They can compare between civilizations.
Yes. So that they can do. They can also map it along with the timeline. You would have seen timeline before, right?
Yeah.
They can make a timeline. Yes. Make picture cards, whatever they are trying to, and present it as a timeline, picture cards and answers. Anything else that you can think of? Map making activities for that particular civilization can also be done. Because most of the civilizations, now the maps don't exist. So if you just take the whole of the map and make them draw that particular civilization or arrive at where that civilization was, that map making activity could also be done. Children can make their own answer cards for the civilization that they are working on. What else? Connect it to other streams and try out answers. Lot of things can be done with this.
Skit, drama.
Exactly. Demonstrations or dramas based on those civilization, musical compositions of that particular civilization. What else? Relating to art. Connect other subjects and see what you can arrive at. You can do model making, art of that particular civilization. Like when we spoke about Chinese, you had pottery, you had silk, lot of studies that can be moved forward from there. And when I spoke about my study, there was accounting. So how can accounting be without books? So then model making of that QPO that they were using. Writing their own stories. What about their own stories?
Also connecting it to the present day, you know. How
Most
much
of these questions are also for the present day.
Hmm.
So you can also see what are there civilizations like that even today, connected to today, the recent environments and events.
Like if we take Indus Valley civilization and study about our own no civilization right now, how we live, we are so disconnected. We don't know our own history or past. No, it's like that. So how much of it is still retained? What is, how do we carry this forward? Are there traces of it found in the present day? The Romans were the first to build roads. And if we compare the roads of today, then we know whether we've moved towards, have we evolved or have we
All roads lead to Rome or no?
like that. So such kind of comparative studies can also be done, like how Imtiaz sir said, no comparison between two civilizations, but comparison between past and the present itself.
When you were talking about the Chinese one, ma'am, it's very similar to the spiritual thing that we follow here, no? During RD and all, you have those fire in the coal being burned and people walk. Certain similarities are there. believing in spirits,
Believing in spirits.
and talking. Those things happen even in today's world. You can see a lot of comparisons and how it was similar to the Roman civilization. Egyptian civilization has similarities in India even today. So,
Picking one
lot
question, you can take one question, and then you'll be if you can study the past and the present, that brings a lot of insight. Like how were the women and the children treated? There was nature of the country. What would
I think here, no? Insurance.
what was the concept of justice? So if we start looking at how it was in the past and right now how it is. Is that question there, Shakina, in this one?
Yes, ma'am. I think somewhere it's in the green.
Will come in that one only, in the maroon one.
Yeah. I remember making answer for that, but I'm not sure.
Must be
Maybe
there.
when I pasted, yeah. Because I did this yesterday in a hurry. Maybe I missed it. Because I remember about women and children and their
Education.
Yeah, education also.
Yeah. So these are the questions that we are looking at for any civilization, and you will see how it simplifies the whole textbook for the child. You have your textbook, history textbooks. Just go through any one chapter on civilization. You see how you start from somewhere and then you go on and on and on. But if you can bring that whole chapter into these structured questions, then it becomes more simpler, isn't it? Yeah. In fact, most of the chapters I did with my children, I did using these questions only. That if we can find answers for these, you've covered up the whole, and that's enough. I also help them make timelines. Suppose we're looking at the Mughal Empire. So, there are individual chapters that cover the entire reign of Mughals. And then if we can draw a timeline and say we started off from here and then this time this emperor came and then the next one and the next one, and we keep looking at inserting information on that timeline. That is a tool in itself for the children to to put everything in perspective. I helped my children study history in this way. Though I was not interested in history in my school days, never. I would just study the lessons before the exam to pass it off. That's all. Get a pass mark in history. Didn't study it out of interest and all. But when I looked at this content, I felt, yeah, I need to know more. I mean, I want to. That sort of raised a lot of interest in me to understand history. How about you all?
For me, ma'am, when I did the research, I was living with them for almost 2-3 weeks. For me, I even remember telling it to ma'am. For me, it is very difficult to come out of that civilization itself. No? It felt like as if I was a part of them. The dreams were about those things. It was really, really difficult for me to come out of it because the questions take you to that much in depth of research and to frame the answers. Like in that nutshell, you'll have to do an immense amount of research. And as you keep doing the research, it felt like as if you were living with them. And that impacted me as well, especially when the war and how this thing fell, it really had even today it can impact me, if I let myself get into that. So these questions are really, really powerful. And I still remember the answers. That's how I remember that question about women, children, how it was important, So it does impact me as an adult. Like for me, history it wasn't something that I hated as much as I did math. But yeah, dates were difficult. It was always about war. No, even today it's always about war only. It's nothing more than that. What happened? What happened? And the wars and the dates where the focus on history goes. This civilization is going to stay with me for the rest of my life. I'm not going to be able to forget it because that much of really to I when ma'am said yesterday you want to take civilization, it came to my mind right away. I didn't have to think about it at all. So that much of work as adult you can do.
Get into.
It can impact you.
I got into research on Sangam age. That was my Sangam civilization. So you can choose your civilization, and it's sort of very interesting for you as an adult to, get into research, what it takes to research. Sometimes you don't find answers at all. Sometimes you believe, multiple websites to get into to understand, or to get that one answer. So you'll have to keep researching. You'll have to find various sources, and they cannot be just out of Wikipedia and cut and paste. It cannot be like that. You should have read a lot of texts and then draw conclusions, and then frame your answers in simple language that the child can understand. So we are talking about children of 9 to 12 years of age who can be introduced to civilizations and who can make their own timelines, who can study this in great detail and get into research. But the early stories can be given off even to a younger child. If they want to be part of it, they can very well be part of the story, kick-off stories. Okay.
And I think if you are combining it with the mainstream, even older children, ma'am, until 14 years, no? They can travel along with you.
Yeah, it goes on till almost 10th standard.
10th. Until history goes away. But even then, if they have that as a subject, no, this serves as this thing for everything.
A structure.
Gives a structure.
For you to study history in itself.
Yeah.
When do we start studying civilization, Sumi? I think from class 4.
As early as 6 or 5, I think.
Class 5 we would be learning. Class 5, ma'am. 5. Class 5 Harappan civilization we would be learning.
Indus Valley, Harappan
Yes,
civilization.
ma'am.
In one of the ICSE textbooks, I think from class 4 itself, it starts. So that's how early we start off all these civilizations. So we'll stop here with history. Would you like to take on the next topic, Shakina? Geography?
I can, ma'am. It depends on them.
Yeah. We go on till 4:15. 4:15.
Yeah, and then we can wind it off. I'll go as much as I can.
Okay.
So coming back to geography, I think we are starting today with seasonal rains. Okay, so I will start sharing my screen. Just give me a minute. Okay, so we'll be doing seasonal rains. This talks about the rains, and you can also do the demonstration of hot air carries more moisture. You would have done a demo with the evaporation condensation and also the hair dryer one where, moisture gets carried off. You've done it already, ma'am? So those things also can be demoed here. The purpose of this is to bring awareness of vaporization and condensation. And then the effect of moisture-laden air on land masses, depending on the time of the year. So the material that is required is chart 4A and 4B. Sorry, 4B and 5B. 4B and 5B.
Shakina ma'am, sorry, could you
Yes.
please repeat the second one? The effect of
Effect of moisture-laden air on land masses.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you.
And also depends on the time of the year, depending on the time of the year. So these are the two charts that we will be focusing on. So it also talks about the wind and also rainfall under 1 inch, 1 to 4 inch and over 4 inches of rainfall. And so here the sun is in the Tropic of, where is the sun here?
Tropic of Cancer.
Yeah, so what, okay, this is for the adult. So let me get into the presentation. So you will gather the group and the material, and you will also recap the prelude to winds. A little bit of prelude to winds because that's where we are moving further into. So we will say, we've come to know that air occupies space, and we also know that hot air rises up. And we also know that hot air rises up and sets the other air in motion. So now when hot air moves over water, it carries a lot of moisture over it. Remember when we did the demo with the hairdryer and the water evaporated. So what happened? It went along with the air. We also saw that when hot air moves to a colder place, it drops down as water. And we know that's how rain happens. So all these things you've done already. You're reiterating and culminating all the presentations that the child has knowledge of so far. Okay. So now you'll be showing chart 4B. So let's look at this chart. The sun's perpendicular rays are on Tropic of Cancer. So you can see the sun here and it's on the Tropic of Cancer. And what period is it in the Northern Hemisphere? What's the season that the Northern Hemisphere is going?
Summer.
Yes. So it's summer in the Northern Hemisphere. The sun's perpendicular rays are directly falling on the land and water equally. But what gets heated up fast? The land gets heated up faster. Yeah. So the air above the land gets heated up too. And what happens to air when it gets heated up? It rises and it sets the other air in motion. So the air that's coming from the sea now moves into the land, and the wind is blowing from the warm sea. So we know that it carries moisture with it. So when the air that comes to blow over the land will immediately start rising up, right? Because the set motion of the air is now colder, and when it comes and reaches the land, it starts to rise up as it is hotter in the land. And as it rises up, it comes in contact with the cooler atmosphere. So as hot air rises up, it comes in contact with the cooler atmosphere and it condenses, and then it starts to precipitate and starts to rain heavily. So now let's look at the chart. Let's look at the colors in the chart. So this yellow color over here indicates that it is a place where rainfall is under 1 inch. And in the light blue, the rainfall is about 1 to 4 inches. And the dark blue says that the rainfall is over 4 inches. And we are very well aware about the variable winds and the steady winds. So have a discussion about the children, about where the air is now blowing from. Where do you think the air is now blowing from? So what can we say about these dark areas? The darker blue are the areas where there is heavy rainfall. The light blue ones are with the moderate rainfall, and the yellow ones are where there is scanty rains or less rainfall. So now when we look at the air, what can you observe about the air in this chart? Look at the steady winds. What's happening to the steady winds? all of the air, yes,
Moving towards land.
yes, towards the equator. But
Okay.
when you look, all the air is directed towards the equator. But there are few places where when you look at the heavy rainfall, it's deflected away from the equator and it moves into the land. Can you see parts of India and South Asia? It moves away from the equator and into the land. So that is the monsoon of that particular area there. So we find a lot of winds blowing into the land wherever there is heavy rainfall. Here it moves into the land where there is heavy rainfall. Here it moves into the land where there is heavy rainfall. Here also it moves into the land where there is heavy rainfall. So observe the pattern and talk to them about that. So now let's look at this chart 5b. Where is the sun now? The sun's perpendicular rays is in the Tropic of Capricorn. So what season is it in the southern hemisphere?
Summer in the south.
Summer. And what about the northern hemisphere?
It's winter in the north.
It's winter. So now let's look at our areas where there is less rainfall. So the area where there is very less rainfall is the yellow ones, and the moderate ones are the light blues. And what happened to the heavier rainfall? Where are they concentrated? They are in the southern hemisphere. So now let's look at the steady winds. What's happening? Again, the winds are moving towards the equator, but wherever there is heavy rainfall, the winds are moving into the land. Can you observe? In the water, the air is moving into the equator, but wherever there is land, this is equator. Where my cursor is the equator. If you look at the steady winds, they are moving into equator from the land, right? But here, if you look at it, their patterns are different. They move into the land. Why? So the question is for you as adults, not for the children. Why is the air deflecting and moving into the land? Okay, you will think on it when you're writing the presentation, we're looking at the chart. But here, the air deflects and they get into the land. And you can see wherever the air deflects is where the area of higher rainfall. Look at Australia here. The air is deflected from the equator and is now moving into the land. And that place has a heavier rainfall. So when the hot air is, where is this hot air blowing from? Where is this hot air that's blowing from? From the sea into the land, if you can see. That's why I was pointing it to the equator, and from there, that's the whole of the sea and it's moving into a land. And what happens when it meets the land?
Ma'am, it becomes warm, rises up, and at a certain point meets cooler air, condenses, and there's precipitation.
That's one of the reasons for the heaviest rainfall. That's what you're trying to bring the focus of the children to there.
Yes.
Because the sun's rays is there and the air is warmer there. So now you'll be leaving the children with, I wonder what's the wettest place in the world? Would you like to find out more about it? So here you are culminating the air, the precipitation, and also the wind and how it plays in setting up the monsoon. So when you look at here, you will be easily talking about India because that's the monsoon season for us. When you go to the southern hemisphere, you should be concentrating on the area that's getting rainfall there because that would be their monsoon. And what is this time period for us? When the sun is in the Tropic of Capricorn, what is the month that we are looking at? Yes, December. But sometimes we also get heavy rains in December, even in this area. If children are bringing about the flood, then you will also have to be aware of what's the reason for that monsoon to be set into place. So we can bring about experts to talk about this. This involves a overall understanding of the geography of that particular location as well. Now, going by this chart, you might say that this area receives less than 1% of rainfall, but that sometimes can also be the flood season for, especially you are in Chennai. You might encounter floods in November, December rains. So you'll have to be knowledgeable, or you'll have to have sources that can give you the answers for that kind of questions as well. So what can be the follow-up activities? So you've set them out with the wettest place in the earth or the driest place in the earth. So you can also bring in facts about highest rainfall. So that can set children to find out facts about the places that get the highest rainfall. Why is it so? Or what's the place that has the lowest rainfall? So in India, you have very much reason to talk about the southwest and the northeast monsoons. Why does it hit India, and where is it reflecting from? Because you are combining all the three elements now. What else can you lead children into? Quick. Anything that you can think of as follow-up questions? What can you do as follow-up activities for them with this? Like I said, you can bring in experts from meteorological department. You can take them out and see how weather impacts, how forecasts are done. Coming in program is really very valuable and important for this presentation. Even as adults, we can sometimes take help in understanding why is it happening that and what is triggering it. So what exactly is a heavy rainfall? Why is it being caused? And you can also think in the lines of different form of precipitations. Then it will lead into snow. Is snow also a rainfall? We'll have to start thinking in those terms. Is it true that only coastal areas receive more rain? Is it otherwise true as well? There are a lot of questions that you will have to start thinking in. And as an assignment, you can have facts about the rainfall for yourself in your file, and you can also leave it in the environment. Highest rainfall in India, across the world, lowest rainfall, India, across the world, what's the driest place on the earth? Any research that you would be wanting to leave in your file. So then you can also talk about inches. Why is rainfall measured in inches? How impactful is it? Because when they talk about the forecast in the news and all, they say about millimeter rain, centimeter rain. So you can connect those aspects. So you'll have to start thinking. I'm giving you all the answers, all the follow-ups.
What is the tool that is used to measure rainfall in a particular place? It's not about measuring the whole of it, but it's about just that one. What's that called? Photometer? No. There's some meter that's used to measure the rainfall. Anybody? Was that gadget used to measure the rainfall? How many millimeters of rain in Adyar or Palikanai? How do they measure that? And then there are, what is it?
Oh, barometer. That's the
Barometer.
pressure.
That's the pressure. It's a very simple device. And then usually during these rains, there are alerts, no? Orange alert, red alert, all that. What does that indicate? What does that tell us? It's not about, getting afraid of these alerts, saying, oh, red alert, okay, it's very dangerous. But it's to know what it signifies, and for us, what does it mean to us? What are the devices used by people who mostly depend on the sea or ocean for their living? People who live along the coasts, it's more for them than for us, isn't it? Who live along the coast itself, whose lives depend there, for them to know. So there will be ways and means in which they know how to identify, these patterns. One simple experiment that you can do with children is to just tie a ribbon on a stick and leave it outside to see, which direction the wind is blowing. The children, very young children, can observe that. In the mornings, it's blowing in from this direction to this direction. If they also know the directions, north, south, east, west, and the intermediate directions, they'll be able to then say, okay, now it is in the northeast. It's blowing from northeast to, So these are things that also gives them vocabulary to interpret what they observe, a precise terminology. You observe many things, but you don't know how to describe them, isn't it? So,
in the same locality, like we are in Tamil Nadu, but when I was in Chennai, I wasn't aware of other places. And when I'm in Hosur, I get to see hailstones. Sometimes, sudden rains and hailstones, and it rains when it doesn't rain in Chennai, and it doesn't rain here when it rains there. So, lots of comparisons can be done if you are aware of. Usually, one place, the capital is prominent when it comes to weather report. No, the others are in the background, but you get to see different rains and why that happens. So that's when I saw hailstones here, I was like, God, that happens here, even in Tamil Nadu, coming from the hottest place, was quite shocking. And the drastic drop in the temperature and the reason behind those things can be a great starting point even for adults and children, to get into seasonal rain.
Nice.
So that leads me into the next presentation, which is aptly named as Local Conditions and Rains. So this is presentation continuing that, but it talks more about the local conditions. So the purpose is to show the local conditions for rain. The prerequisites would obviously be seasonal rains. And the material that would be needed for this is 6B, 7B, 8B, and 21A. I don't think I put 21A in my
What is that, ma'am? 6B, 7B, 8B?
6B, 7B, 8B, and 21A.
Okay.
Unfortunately, I didn't put 21A in my presentation, but you can go have a look as to what it is. So this is chart 6B, 7B, and 8B. You all received your charts, right, by now? Okay. So now you will gather the group and the materials. So talk to them about the material and the rains, and the best time would be if there's any local rain happening. If not, also you can relate to that, We've been talking a lot about rainfall that's caused by the steady winds and the variable winds. And we also saw how it's also affected by the seasons. But there is rainfall that's also caused by local conditions. And that's how things are in a particular place on Earth. Remember how we saw about the demo of hot air rising up, precipitating, and we also saw how it gets carried away in the experiment that we did with our hair dryer. So reiterate the demos for the children, bring them back to it. So now here in this picture, we see that the hot air is blowing towards the land from the water. So which is the hot air here? The red arrows are the hot air, as arrows demonstrate, and the blue ones are the cold. So when hot air blows over water, it carries a lot of moisture, and we see that when it meets a cliff that's next to it, the hot air carrying a lot of moisture has now nowhere to go, but it has to climb up the cliff. So it rises up, and as it rises up, it meets the cold air, and it starts to condense into clouds, and clouds form in places exactly where there are high cliffs. So when the clouds here that you see can hold no more water, you can also talk about is when the clouds that can hold no more water, they start to precipitate. That's because they have a lot of moisture in them. So it's one of the conditions to rain locally. And we call these rains as coastal rains. And these places are also considered very rainy or wetter than the inlands. Because here you're talking about the sea and how it meets the cliff and the land. So obviously you are referring to coastal places. Now talk about chart 7b. So there are other things also that can bring rain. You remember near the equator, it starts to get very hot during summer, and the regions around the equator are called as tropical or tropics or torrid zone. So now here in this chart, you see this is a place in the torrid zone, and we see lots of tropical plants glowing here. You can refer to the chart and you can show them. Some charts will have lots of coconut trees. So it's very hot in most of these places. So what happens when it's very hot on the land? So the hot air starts to rise up because it's constantly getting heated up by the sun, and it starts from the sea and moves into the land, carrying a lot of moisture along with it. So now you can show chart 9b, then you can talk about. So here, when again, the air that moves into the land has lots of moisture in it, it starts to condense when it starts to meet a colder atmosphere. And when it can no longer hold the moisture, it drops all of it on the land. That's especially near the coastal areas. So these are also called as torrential downpour. They're called as torrential downpour. Torrential downpour, because we also spoke about torrid zones. So torrential downpour, or they are also called as equatorial rains, since they happen mostly near the equator. Some of these places which have these rains are uniformly wet throughout the year. Have you heard of such places before? So orographic rains could also be introduced here if it was not introduced elsewhere. Now this would be the place to bring in the orographic rain as well. That's chart 22A. So the follow-up for this can be your own areas and rains and why it rains. People from Chennai, you can very well relate to your rains. People from my place can definitely relate to hailstones and especially the summer rains. Why it happens so frequently? We have all the climate in one day. We have windy, we have winter in the morning, then windy in the afternoon, and it starts to rain in the evening. There are places like that. So refer to your local conditions and talk to children about that. Find out why it happens. Get into study. There are places in equator where by default the afternoons are, the evenings rain and the mornings are extremely hot. Might have to study about those. Children can study about what else can be done. Yeah, so I think you're all thinking. Give you time so you can write it in your presentations. Think for the follow-ups. Put them in your presentations. So the next presentation would be ocean current. For this, I would want 2 minutes of yours. I'll be back in a moment.
Guys, how does one spell orographic rains?
O-R-O.
You sure it's O-R-O, no?
Yeah. O-R-O.
And that equatorial rainfall, no, that rain is otherwise called as,
Torrential rain.
kindly spell me, please.
Yeah. Torrential. Torrential. Torrential.
Thank you, thank you.
It's in the torrid zone now. That's why it's called the torrential rainfall.
So yeah, can we continue? You want some time?
Continue, ma'am.
Continue.
Okay, so the next presentation would be ocean currents. So we'll begin with a demonstration, but you can note the purpose. The purpose is to bring awareness that wind creates surface ocean currents. To bring awareness that wind creates surface ocean currents. To bring an awareness of existence of cold and warm currents. To give the name of some ocean currents. So the material that you would require, you have to, did I say give the names of some ocean currents? The third purpose is to give the names of some ocean currents. Okay, so the material would be have some shallow tray with some water in it. About 1 inch of water. Have some sawdust, a block of stone or a brick, depending on the size of your tray.
Sorry, ma'am, please repeat. What did you say after the water?
Coarse sawdust. Sawdust.
Sawdust. Okay.
Sawdust, yes. So that it floats. Block of stone or a brick, depending on the size of your tray. And a straw to blow over the water. To gather the group and material. Can you all see the water here?
Yeah, yes.
Yes. Yes.
Gather the group and material and pour some sawdust over it. So let's observe what happens here.
Watch carefully. What do you observe?
What happened? What did you observe?
Circulating in that particular area.
The sawdust was circulating in the air where we were blowing the air.
The wind is blowing.
Yes.
The
And it moves.
sawdust, yeah.
So now let's place an obstacle. Is it clear? Can you see?
Yeah.
Let's try to do it again.
கொஞ்சம் பின்னால தள்ளி வைங்க Shakina. Where exactly are you blowing the இல்ல Shakina and the
Yes, ma'am.
stone push it a little behind.
Forward?
Yeah, like that. Yeah.
Can you all see? Because I feel it's blurry sometimes. I'm not sure if it's the same for you.
No, it is clear. It's clear.
Okay.
But yeah, let's see the pattern. Yeah. Beautiful.
So what happened? What did you observe? When the wind was blowing, the sawdust deflected.
Anu, what did you observe, Anu?
Actually, the direction is somewhat like opposite to each other. The movement is
Just describe what you see.
the obstacle makes it to divide into two parts now.
Yeah.
What happened before the obstacle?
Ma'am, even before the obstacle, it's still split into two currents, no ma'am?
But
There
it's
is
still
some
moved
wind
forward.
moving back.
Yeah. There was also forward movement and then it started deflecting. But with the obstacle also, there's a forward movement sometimes and sometimes it went over and around the obstacle as well. Yes. So you can also try this experiment your end and see how it works out for you.
Right, with varying lengths,
Yeah.
placing the obstacle at
Varying
different
lengths.
parts, seeing
Yes.
different
width.
sizes of
This is-
obstacles. Huh?
Yeah, this is the tray that I was able to source from my end. So you might have to take different factors into consideration and try doing that. So now you can compare this scenario like we always do to the global level. So this is what happens on the ocean too. Talk about the demos, talk about what happened, what the children observed, and now you can relate it to the global level. So this is what happens in the ocean too. The ocean currents get deflected in other directions as well when it gets to meet an obstacle. So as currents blown by the wind strike the land, the current splits, just like we saw here. Part of the current goes left and part of it goes to the right. So now you will be giving out the terminologies. Water blown out of cold regions make cold currents. Water blown out of cold region makes cold currents in the ocean, and water blown out of hot region makes hot currents. So did you also see that the sawdust was going in circular patterns as well? So those are called as gyres, Gyres. Those are water moving in circular paths. And when the currents meet an obstacle like an island, the currents are deviated along the coast of the land.
What happened, Sangini?
Shivani, can you please repeat that?
From where? Did you also see the sawdust going in circular paths?
Yeah,
You got those? Those are called as gyres, Gyres.
got that. After that,
Those are water moving in circular paths. And when current meets an obstacle like an island, the currents are deviated along the coast of the land. They are deviated along the coast of the land. So now show chart 9b. So we see some currents on this map. The red ones are the warm currents and the blue ones are the cold currents. So where do we see the warm currents here? From the tropical regions to the inwards of the land. See, the warm currents are originating from the tropical regions inwards. Let's talk about the arrows in the Pacific. Some currents are blowing down from North America and blow towards Alaska. Here, some currents are blowing towards North America and towards Alaska. Some from Europe to the northwest of Africa. Yeah. Some from the Europe to the northwest of Africa. It means that the wind is blowing from that direction, and so we can see that the currents are also blowing from that direction. So now you're connecting the currents to the winds and bringing to their awareness that these arrows are also talking about the winds that blows from that direction. So talk about what the cold current and hot current does to that particular places. So do you see these cold currents blowing from Europe to the northwest of Africa? These ones. If not for these cold currents blowing over the ocean towards Africa, it would be even hotter than this place already is. So can you imagine what's northwest of Africa already is? What part of northwest of Africa is it geographically?
Sahara Desert.
Yes. So if not for these currents, it would be even more hotter. Can you imagine what's hotter than the desert itself? And there are warm currents blowing over Finland. Can you see here? The warm currents are blowing over Finland, Norway, and Alaska as well. Here. If not for these warm currents, it would be even colder than it already is. In the summer, because of these warm currents, this land is accessible. and also throughout the year. Because of these warm currents, this land is accessible throughout the year. So point out to certain hot currents and talk about its prominence and what it does to them. You see few hot currents here, like we spoke about Alaska, Finland here. Talk about what it does to those places. So the cold current also affects the land masses. Not only the hot currents, but also the cold current affects the land masses. Though they are in the ocean, these cold currents cools the land masses and makes the coastal area temperate. Though they are in the ocean, these cold current cools the land masses and makes the coastal area temperate. If you look at all the cold currents, they are moving towards the coastal areas. And that's the reason for them to make it temperate. We'll stop with this.
Yes, Shakina. Yeah.
There's another demonstration where,
We'll stop with this.
we'll stop with this here, but that will take long. But again, that's a continuation of this current, so you might continue that later.
Yeah. Do a little research on ocean currents to understand this even better. For yourselves to study about the ocean currents. I was surprised to know that there is only one current that's flowing throughout. we see them like, small patterns, right? But that is not how it is. And the whole thing, the whole water body is one, right? So then there's just one current that is actually flowing up and down, going up and down the whole of the earth. That was phenomenal for me to understand.
But it varies because of the density and how the water bodies are. Because no two oceans meet, so that's also because of the current.
If you can look at it further, it's amazing to understand this. And what happens? See, navigators, when sailors, would you, if you were a sailor, would you want to, travel across a gyre? What might happen to your boat or a ship or the ship that you're traveling in? So imagine all that you will have to then, go through when you're going from one place to another. Keep in mind where the gyres are formed, and I will have to then cross these gyres and bear them in mind. And then what about the currents? Am I going to travel against the currents or in the direction of the current? It would be easier. Shakina?
That's what I said. Into it or towards it or away from it. No? Navigations.
So that calls for a going out trip or somebody who can come in to talk about all this to the children, isn't it? If we do not have the knowledge, then we may want to bring in somebody who can talk about it, and who best than the sailors themselves. So think about all these resources, whom to call, and how will the children experience this. Are there many other ways? Like Shakina showed a small experiment. Can you do it at a larger scale to understand this? Walk along a riverbed to understand the flow and how the water flows and in which direction and how it takes different course. All that is very
estimate near the coast. Sometimes where the river meets the coast is also an excellent place to understand what happens, how the current and whirlpools happen. I've seen that literally, and sometimes separate also. It goes, meets, creates a whole area of seabed, and again drifts apart also. They had started constructing a bridge there, and then it decided to separate by itself. Yeah, and there's no purpose for the bridge at all. There were whirlpools forming there. It became a deadly area to cross, and it had quite few depth. But when tsunami happened, both those land water bodies split and it went back to normal. The bridges were destroyed, everything was destroyed.
Uh-huh.
Like in a span of 2 to 3 years, we literally saw it
Water,
happen.
water and its behavior is very beautiful to
Mm.
observe, a study in itself. And for us to understand, we need to observe. We need to go and get in touch with it. So people whose lives depend on it have greater knowledge, even if they've not studied all this. They have greater knowledge about it. So to go and talk to them directly, to such communities, will give you a better understanding of all this, isn't it?
When I spoke to a fisherwoman, ma'am, they say, the seasonal stopping of fishing
Hmm.
for breeding. She
Hmm.
said that's not for breeding.
Ah.
That's because of these air that rises up and they cause currents there. The ships the boats get trapped in it, it seems.
Oh.
That's why it's in the month of April. We
Uh-huh.
were, they stop the fish harvest during April, remember?
Yeah, they
The
say
reason
it's for
being said to that
breeding.
is like for breeding. It's not for breeding. The
Oh.
fisherwoman said it's not for breeding. அது
Ah.
எப்பவுமே முட்டை போட்டுட்டு தான் இருக்கும். The reason for that is for this air that happens and the boats get trapped in it, it seems.
Oh, see that.
The currents, no? So that's the reason they give the break at that April and May. Not many fishermen also know. It's like some really old people who have observed the patterns, no? They get to know it.
Mm-hmm.
So he said, "சுழல் காத்து அடிக்குங்க, அதனாலதான் boat எல்லாம் மாட்டிக்கும் அதுல." So then I realized, oh, okay, this is related to that, not for trading.
Mm-hmm. So nice, Shakina. Thank you so much for the session. Hope you all also enjoyed it.
Yeah, I enjoyed it a lot. Let's see how the others. It's been nice meeting you all, getting connected.
Yeah, we'll meet often, Shakina.
Yes, ma'am.
So we'll
Thank
stop
you.
and
Yeah.
we'll come back at 4:45. What's the time? 4:25. 4:40. 4:40. We'll come back at 4:40 for the next session. Thank you.
Okay, thank you everyone. Have a
Thank
nice
you, Shakina
Thank you,
ma'am.
Shakina ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yeah, bye bye.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Sangini, did you have something to say? You were looking a little lost, Sangini. Hello, Yoshamari. What was it? Unmute yourself. Unmute yourself. I'm not able to hear you.
Ma'am, I was just thinking, ma'am, how that happened.
Mm-hmm.
என்னால just chart பார்த்து எனக்கு இது பண்ணிக்க முடியல. I was just thinking.
Okay. Same.